One. Hi, this is Bruce Rawles, and I'm speaking again today with Gary Renard and Cindy Lora-Renard. And this is always a joy to do that. And so glad to be with you again and looking forward to our conversation. So welcome, Gary and Cindy.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you for having us again.
Yeah.
And we always enjoy our conversations with you. Always.
Very much likewise.
We
Very
go
much
back
likewise.
pretty far doing these podcasts with you.
Yeah, yeah. 2006 or 7 or something like that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
And
Yeah,
when-
I just put a picture at Facebook of us. Must have been about 11 years ago.
yeah.
You, Cindy, and me, Mikey Lemieux, and we were at a conference, and it just reminded me how far we go back, so many years, at least 16, 17.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you gave a couple of presentations in Medford and Ashland, and those
Oh,
are
yeah.
pivotal, wonderful
Oregon.
events. Yeah, yeah.
And in the illusion, that feels like a whole nother lifetime. I mean, when I think of, those workshops,
hmm
going back to, Northern California, Oregon, those areas, it just feels like that could have been a memory from a past life. Yeah. It's just, time is very strange to me these days. I say to Gary often that my sister and I always say this to each other, we're feeling the dream. We're feeling the dream. Just because time doesn't feel the same as it used to. It really doesn't feel like you would think it should feel. So it's very off for me. Something that may have happened 2 weeks ago sometimes feels like, 6 months ago.
It's very
Well,
surreal, isn't it?
very surreal because time's relative. It's holographic, as we know. There's no linear time frame anyway. There's no time, but I've been really experiencing it that way, just off, not like you would think you would feel it. And especially this particular year. And I always joke that every year at the beginning of the year, I always say the same thing, like, oh, I can't believe it's a new year already. Time seems to go so fast. But I really mean this year felt like only a month or two has passed, and it's already October. And I don't know. It just, the Course does speak to that just briefly about a celestial speed up, and I do believe that's happening. And everybody experiences that. Their perception of that may be differently, but in my perception, the way I'm perceiving that is there's a speed up going on, because we can skip intervals, as the Course says. Time collapses for us when we forgive, so I think I'm experiencing some of that on occasion. So, but with awareness, and it's fascinating.
It really is. It does seem like the more we pay attention to what our thoughts are, and look at the judgments and then forgive them, the more surreal time becomes, and the more bizarre what we call reality seems to be.
Sure
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Sure does.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel that too. Do you feel that on occasion?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Time intervals just, yeah, it's just kind of wonky. It just seems like it goes, back and forth. But but I love our topic for today, because the Course is all about pure non-dualism, that there's only one reality, and that's made very clear at the very beginning in the preface, that there's a distinction between truth and an illusion. He makes that very clear. And what you were calling quantum forgiveness, which is the Course's, true forgiveness teachings, is really what gets us there to that experience, and to create a more joyful inner world for ourselves, more peaceful. We can sustain our peace and our joy in a way that is lasting, more lasting than if we weren't practicing this kind of true forgiveness. I don't think Gary and I have done any event where we have not mentioned true forgiveness. The way the Course teaches it.
Mm-hmm.
I think every single event we've always done, because that's the meat of the Course, is really undoing the ego through, accepting the atonement for ourselves, which is part of forgiveness, recognizing nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll let Gary speak for a minute. I'm just all of a sudden just felt like I got on a roll because I get so excited and passionate about the Course, but
Yeah.
I do have something I want to touch on in a little bit.
Okay.
Not relevant to the topic we're talking about, but go ahead, Gary. I felt like I had to open with excitement. My excitement here.
Oh, it's okay. I enjoy listening to you.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't even feel like I'm, here in the world. It really is very much like a dream, but then the world keeps trying to suck me back in, drag me back in. Reminds me of this movie, Godfather Part 3, Al Pacino. He said, I thought I was out, and they keep dragging me back in. And that's it. So you can almost feel it trying to suck you back in. And of course, we know the ego will come up with 101,000 ways to convince you that it's real, or at least try to. Mm-hmm. And especially the last 3.5 years or so, I'm writing a 5th book with Art in Person. We talk about all these crazy things that have gone on, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Because at the beginning of 2020, everybody was optimistic. Oh, this is going to be the roaring 20s of, the last century, and, just the greatest decade, the greatest year. And here in Hollywood, everybody was so optimistic, and it was going to be so wonderful. Then, of course, the crap hits the fan and changes everything. And if there's one thing we can depend on in this world, it's that it's going to change. In fact, that may be the only thing that we can depend on in this world, is that it won't be the same. And so we've been talking about all these things and looking back on it, because I had to, write about it. The last 3.5 years have been even more bizarre than anything before it, I think. I mean, I'm not comparing our problems to the kinds of problems that people had in the 1930s and 1940s, but still, it's been pretty out there. And it's so easy to get dragged in and look at the screen and say, oh, that's the problem there, or that person is the problem. Like the war that just broke out in the Mideast. It's so easy. Everybody's got a reason. Each side has a reason. Of course, they always do. And it's so easy to pick sides, and it's so easy to make it real. And what we have to do is just take a step back and say, what is that but separation? What would the Course say? The classic example of separation, but the world doesn't think of it that way. It's just, oh, that's what happened, and there's a reason for it and all that. But it's just separation over and over again, played out, acted out, from death to even birth, although people don't think of it that way. Mm-hmm. And it's been a really crazy time. And so we, as Course students, need to just say, wait a minute, and remember that what we're seeing is not true. And that if we're blaming one person or one side, it's because we have chosen to see what we secretly believe about ourselves, those secret sins and hidden hates that the Course talks about. We chose to see it in that person, even the guilt. At one point, the Course says about the teacher of God, what he sees is his own guilt seen as being outside of him. So, whether I'm mad at Putin for invading Ukraine or some other world situation, his insanity is my insanity that I feel because I was stupid enough to separate myself from God, or at least I thought I did. Mm-hmm. And we know now that that's impossible, but, that's what I've chosen to see, so that the guilt and the stupidity and everything else can be in him instead of me. And that's also true of American politicians who I don't like. I've chosen to see my stupidity in them. And so it doesn't even matter what side you're on. It's just you've chosen to see whatever you secretly believe about yourself in that person that you don't like and that you are judging. But the Course gives us a way out. It gives us a way home.
Sure does. Yeah.
Absolutely. And even just the whole premise of there being sides, is a non-dual or a dualistic premise.
Oh, yeah.
And it basically, without challenging that assumption, forgiveness is impossible. Yeah.
Right.
Because
That's a good point.
as long as we think that there's two sides and and that the separation happened, making two sides possible, then everything we do will then be just a forgiveness to destroy or forgiveness to keep the separation real, basically. Yeah.
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 Oh,
And
go ahead.
I was going to say, seeing the duality and changing your mind to non-duality is something that you can practice so much that it becomes almost automatic. Yes, certainly sometimes we have to work more at it than other times.
Mhm.
But I think the more you do it, the more you get to the point where the Holy Spirit is in charge of your unconscious mind. And the more you want to do the ego, the miracles of true forgiveness become almost automatic. We just do it automatically. And when you get to that point, it gets a lot easier because you know what everything is for. And it's very difficult for the ego to throw you curveballs because you just know that it's going to do that. And you're ready. That state of miracle readiness that it talks about in those first 50 miracles principles. It's like, I get up in the morning, put the Holy Spirit in charge. And, I know something's going to happen. Yeah, I mean, it always does. And whatever it is, I'm kind of ready because, it's not that I'm expecting something bad to happen. I know that something bad is going to happen. And, but not all day. So when there's nothing to forgive, hey, that's the fun part. And you can have a good time. The Course says you should celebrate. And I have nothing against that. And when, the world slaps you in the face and you know what it's for, well, you can do it pretty fast. And I think that you just get better and better at it the more you practice. And that's like anything else, except I think it's especially important with forgiveness. And I think that the people who do it are the people who really want the results. They really want to go home to God. When they say, I want the peace of God, they mean it. And that's not for everybody. All of us are preoccupied with the world at first. And it's, I think, a very interesting process to switch to wanting to be with God instead of wanting what the Course would call all that glitters in the dream. Of course, the irony is you can have both, but you can have both or neither. I don't think that you can have God and the world without, recognizing God as your source. That's the only way to make a meaningful choice. So that's the only reality. And then you can be in the world like, okay, it's a place where I'm like an actor and I'm playing the part of Gary, but I know that I'm not Gary. Because, we live in Hollywood, we know actors, and most of them, they don't confuse themselves with being the part that they're playing in the movie. Well, a couple of them probably do, but
most of the time, right?
most of the time. And I try not to confuse myself with being the Gary that I'm playing the part of. It's such a temporary thing when you think about it. It's almost silly.
Although, as you're saying that, I was thinking, gee, this is the perfect time of year for realizing we're in costume. We're playing Halloween dress up all year long and just forgetting that we're doing that, basically.
We're forgetting we're have our masks on.
Yep.
Yeah. I have a chapter in my third book, Heaven Is Now, called And the Oscar Goes To, because we're playing our roles so well. We all deserve an Oscar for how well we're playing our made up roles on the stage of life. And you brought up something, Bruce, a little bit earlier that reminded me of a lesson that I just wanted to comment on the workbook, lesson 12, which is really relevant to what's happening as a way of looking at the world and what's happening in the world right now. And that lesson 12, is I am upset because I see a meaningless world. And I only wanted to read just a few short, sentences from this and then comment on it, because I think it's a really important part of forgiveness and remembering how we can choose to see world events or whatever is playing out on the screen of life. And so the first few sentences say, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. The importance of this idea lies in the fact that it contains a correction for a major perceptual distortion. You think that what upsets you is a frightening world, or a sad world, or a violent world, or an insane world. Like, how often do we find ourselves saying, this world is crazy, this world is insane? But it's saying, we're really upset because we see a meaningless world. Yep. And we're placing these judgments on the world instead of just shifting, when the Course is all about not even judging the world at all as good or bad. This lesson is basically saying none of it is true. So if none of it's true, it's just meaningless because it wasn't created by God, which means, we can come back to our minds and remain in a place of neutrality about it, be the observer. Yep. And say, if we're going to play the game of good and bad, we say, well, this is good, it makes the world just as real, because that means there has to be something bad. Just as if the world, we see a satisfying world, that implies an unsatisfying world, and we're stuck in duality again. Yep. So he just
it's the two-sided coin of special love and special hate, but it's the same coin.
The same point. And I just like the way he says this. He says, be sure that you do not alter the time intervals between applying today's idea to what you think is pleasant and what you think is unpleasant. For the purposes of these exercises, there's no difference between them. And then he just goes on to say, finally, what is meaningless is neither good nor bad. Why then should a meaningless world upset you? If we're looking at it that way, not getting trapped into the good or bad game. Finally, if you accept the world as meaningless and let the truth be written upon it for you, it would make you indescribably happy. I love that, because it reminds us it's our own judgments upon ourselves and the world that makes the world real or not, or gives it meaning or not. Yep. We give the world all the meaning that it has. And I know this is not easy to practice in situations where we, see what most of the world would judge as upsetting events. But here the Course is just giving us another way. If anybody is listening to this and is even maybe new to the Course a bit, it's just giving us another way to look, to observe what's in front of our faces. There really is another way of thinking about the world, and we can remain in that neutral place if we just remember, that if God didn't create this world, that means it doesn't exist, because what he creates is eternal. But let's not fall into level confusion either and pretend that we don't see, people's, and have compassion if people are suffering, including ourselves.
Of course.
So we want to have compassion for ourselves and others. If there's suffering, horrific events going on, we can, play our roles the best we can to be compassionate, practice forgiveness. But at the same time, in our own minds, we can come back to that place of neutrality and remember that what I am seeing is not true. I really am dreaming. And practice forgiveness. And that's the whole meat, the juice, of the Course, is changing our perceptions.
Absolutely. As you're saying that, I'm kind of reminded of a metaphor that came to mind a while ago that I've been finding useful. Is I'm thinking of how the Holy Spirit sees the ego and how the ego sees the Holy Spirit. I'm picturing Ken Wapnick's wonderful metaphysical chart. And I'm kind of like, if you can imagine like a one-way mirror that is between those two thought systems. And the ego is a dark thought system, but it has a mirror that reflects its darkness back onto itself. So it can't see anything on the other side of that one-way mirror into the Holy Spirit's light, which would basically dissolve it.
Right.
But so the darkness there's nothing there, but it's reflecting the nothing back to itself. But the Holy Spirit can see through the other direction, see that there's nothing there, and therefore isn't disturbed by it.
Oh, it's very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And so it's like, well, there's actually a line in the Christian Bible where it says the light shines in the darkness and the darkness comprehends it not. I think that kind of fits with that. It's like, that inner kindness teacher in our mind, it seems like, that says you can forgive this, but you first have to look at all the specifics, all the particulars, see how the ego wants to inflate the nothing that seems to be there into some big deals, the special loves, the special hates, the grievances, the whole gamut of things that obviously we don't want to just dismiss because they're the classroom, but once we see them as they are and then kind of drag them through that one-way mirror out into the Holy Spirit's light, it's like, oh, now that I see it from that perspective, that wasn't such a big deal. But I have to be willing to look at each specific, right?
Important part.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Looking is so important to look,
Yep.
to not repress it or deny it.
Yeah.
Our experience, but to be able to see it is the only way to bring it to the truth, to the light.
Exactly.
Right.
All you have to do is notice it. It's like you don't have to dwell on it. You certainly don't want to analyze it, which just makes it more real.
Exactly.
And
don't need to write a PhD paper on it or anything. Just
right. I love what Jesus said to Helen once. Can you find light by analyzing the darkness? That's a pretty smart ass thing to say to a psychoanalyst. I guess that's what they do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, she was a research psychologist, but she also did therapy on the side. And the more you analyze something, I never thought of it that until the course. The more you analyze something, you're just making it real. You're giving it your meaning instead of the Holy Spirit, which would say that it's nothing. So a lot of it is just remembering to not make it real.
Yeah.
Because if you're making it real, well, that's judgment, and it stays with you forever. Yeah. And so I like to just think, okay, if I start to even get a little bit upset, that's the big red flag that you have to watch out for. It doesn't have to be anger. It doesn't have to be obvious. Even if you just feel a little uncomfortable, it's really all the same, according to the course. That's the time you need to just say, okay, I must have been making it real, because if I wasn't making it real, I wouldn't be upset. Yeah, so
I must have chosen wrongly because I'm not at peace. Right?
Exactly. That's yeah, boy, the course has a way of putting things.
I didn't realize till a few years ago how attached, just to give a personal example, I know personal examples can be helpful sometimes. So
sure. I
just remember when I was going through just one little body thing after another was coming up, issue, and I didn't realize I had to look like we're talking about and go how real I was making the body. I didn't realize how attached I was to the body identification until all this stuff started, happening, with the body. And then I had to do my homework. I had to really step up my game and practice, what we teach. I know that you learn what you teach and there's no accidents there, but I had to step up my game and really choose the strength of the Holy Spirit and the strength of Christ in certain moments of those times. I know a lot of people could relate to this with whatever things they might be going through. But that's really the work, is to notice when we do get upset, or we feel afraid or anxious or whatever it may be, so that really look at it. But there's a way of looking at it, with the Holy Spirit, and not to forget to invite the Holy Spirit in to be an observer, with us. So we're not doing it on our own is a very important component to undoing and to being in that place where you can get it to be above the battleground, where you can be with the Holy Spirit looking at it from a different perspective. So I myself, I always don't claim to be, a perfect human being, although for many years I thought I had to. I felt like I had to put on this persona of, oh, everything is perfect. And I had to put on that face, that mask, because I'm a course teacher. but I'm also a student. So I had to step back and reevaluate, just look at things and remind myself, with the Holy Spirit's help, really putting into practice all these years what we've been teaching. And I think it's important to share this as a course teacher too, because just because we're course teachers doesn't mean we're not students also. That if we assume we just know everything, we've got everything all 100% figured out all the time, and we're never going to make mistakes, and we have to be perfect, we're falling into the same trap, of, that perfection game, that somehow, that look, we all make mistakes, and we will until the ego's undone. And it's okay. We can forgive ourselves for that, and by forgiveness, again, it just means we're forgiving ourselves for buying into the belief that we're something we're not, right? That we've really separated from God. We made up our own personality, persona. This whole game of life is a made up idea or concept. So none of it's true. And it's not really me. It's not really you. So we can come back to that mindset that reminds us that, well, I remain as God created me. That's what the Course is telling me. And if I remain as God created me, it's impossible to be guilty of anything. So we're ultimately forgiving guilt, this unconscious guilt that we believe that we're guilty over the separation. And it always can come back to that, although the guilt can play itself out and make it look like we are feeling bad or upset about a billion different things. But there's only one. Course is saying there's only one problem, and it's the guilt over believing that we pulled off the impossible by separating from God's love. And so when we really look at that thought and bring that thought to the light of truth, the Holy Spirit's answer that says, you're still at home in God. Nothing happened. Not one note in heaven's song was missed just because we took that tiny mad idea, made it real for an instant. Heaven's song, it just kept on going. Reality kept on going. Didn't miss a beat. And although it's not easy to practice that, I always like to just keep encouraging people to not give up on it, because the more and more we just train the mind, we need mind training. And the more we train the mind by catching ourselves when we do tend to kind of go down that spiral, let the ego, right, take over and dominate, we can catch that sooner. The sooner we can work at the mind level and change our mind about it.
Yeah.
So
when you mentioned spiral, and then also a few minutes ago getting stuck, and it kind of reminded me of a conversation I had yesterday with a fellow course student teacher, Stefan Bowles. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. Anyway, he brought up the analogy of quicksand. I thought that's interesting, because when you're in quicksand, the worst thing you can do is thrash around, because that just sinks you down further. But if you can just stop and just kind of like, okay, spread eagle kind of thing, and that's the best thing you can do. And when you find yourself stuck in the ego thought system, or appearing to be stuck, and I was thinking, well, that's a pretty good metaphor, because at that point, if you watch your thoughts without condemning yourself, but just kind of watch there, and wait for help, which is always there, metaphorically, with Holy Spirit's metaphoric hand. It's sort of like doing a freeze frame and then watching the ego fumble the ball, in slow-mo, and just say, that has had no impact on my real being. And I think that's the Holy Spirit's, counsel at every moment. It's like, nothing happened here, but if you just watch this with me, we can see that nothing happened. And then you can, we can pull you out of this thing.
By the way, just to add to a couple of things that Cindy said. When it comes to being a teacher, first of all, the Course says that a teacher of God is anyone who chooses to be one. So if you choose to be a teacher of God, you're a teacher of God. You don't have to get permission from anybody. You don't have to ask the Course in Miracles, please, if you can be, a teacher of God. But the Course also says that to teach is to demonstrate. So it's very clear that you don't have to take on a traditional teaching role. You don't have to get up in front of people like Cindy and I and speak to them. I remember in my first book, Garden Person told me that it would be possible. They weren't recommending it, but they said it would be possible for me to go through my entire life, do A Course in Miracles, and never tell anybody. And there were a couple of times I was tempted to do that. My original intention was to publish the book anonymously, to put on a different name on the book.
I
Because
seem to recall something about broken glass and in a
Yeah.
previous book, but we won't go there yet.
Exactly. So if you don't want to tell anybody, you don't have to. And certain events and certain advice from them and the Holy Spirit did lead me to get out there and take on a more traditional teaching role. And the reason that I'm glad that I did really has nothing to do with the public persona. It's like Cindy said, you learn what you teach, right? And I really feel that I've learned the Course much better, especially the last, 20 years. I've been doing it for 30, but the last 20 I've been out there. And I really feel that I learned the Course much better by repeating it over and over and over again.
You can say that again.
Yeah, it made it more real for me.
Say it again. Say it again.
Yeah, so it really is true. And I do feel like I've learned what I teach. So it was the right thing for me to do for me. And if it helped anybody else, then that's even better.
Yes, and thank you for that. That repetition is such a huge thing because, like you in your work have said, you can't hear right-minded ideas too often. I mean, it's so helpful, isn't it?
Yeah, and by the way, I never would have learned those right-minded ideas without some very big help. From whether it's Arden Persa, you mentioned Ken Wapnick. There are just a few sources that have really helped me.
And what helps is each other.
Yes.
When we talk to each other, right, everybody, whoever's listening, when we actually have meaningful conversations, really joining, real joining, having these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
We don't always need like some teacher to talk to get, it's each other that we learn from.
Absolutely.
We learn from each other. I don't know, that just came as a hit that, wait a minute, we can't get home without each other. Right?
Yeah, and the humor that's obvious in the Course too. I think a lot of times I used to read the Course by myself, and occasionally I'd notice like, well, is there a little lampooning of the ego going on? But when you read it out loud in a study group or in a class, it's like it just kind of jumps off the page. It's like how absolutely off the wall nutso insane is everyone's ego, and Jesus is lampooning the absurdity of that thought system, not in any kind of mean-spirited way whatsoever, but just saying, how silly is that? And how the needless suffering and sense of sacrifice that we're all imposing on ourselves when, in any moment, we could just say, I'm not upset for the reason I think. I could see peace instead of this,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to go back to that analogy of the quicksand. That is a great analogy about, we tend to fight for our survival, fighting for the ego's fighting for its survival. Yep. And when we're in quicksand, if we tend to thrash around, and it makes it worse when we're fighting it. And I understand what that feels like to fight ego. And I remember I had a dream, a while back where I was in a car driving, and Gary was with me. It was really interesting because somehow we started driving over very flooded waters. The street was flooded. And somehow, I think you got out of the car, or got out, but I was stuck in the car. And the car started sinking. The car started, and I felt in that moment like I needed to fight for my survival because I was about to die, in the dream. This is a while back. I didn't have this just last night, but this was a little while back. But, and I remember thinking, I actually felt what it might have felt like to think, oh my God, just if I just surrendered, because I felt like I felt like what it would feel like if you're about to just, this is your time of passing. This is your time of passing. And it was a strange feeling, because there are two ways to look at that. You can fight it, or you can just surrender and trust. And, not that you're not going to try to save yourself if you're in a situation where you're, of course you are. If you're in a situation where your car is, in a flooded situation, of course you're going to try to help yourself. But I mean, it's a very interesting position the dream showed me to be in when you are faced with a choice of either kind of surrender to it, or do you try to fight something, try to battle it, try to battle the ego. And in that particular dream, I woke up, but I woke up before I kind of finished that idea that, gosh, of the fighting part. I just woke up, but I woke up and I go, oh my God, that's a strange feeling to feel like you're about to let go of this world. Like yeah. And so my point being, the reason I brought that up is that we often find ourselves fighting for these bodies. We fight for our survival. When the truth is, look, whenever it's our time, we're all going to appear to pass from this world. We're all going to die, even though we don't really die. We're all going to pass from this world. And the reason for our passing could be a number of reasons. There's a gazillion ways that we could pass from this world. And we don't need to fight the idea that we're going to leave this world, because we're not really here anyway. There's no reason to really fight for our survival at the mind level, But in the dream, it's important to remember, I think there's some confusion sometimes. It doesn't mean we're not going to watch after ourselves, be careful, right? You pay, you care for, because that's having compassion for yourself. If we're, sick, we might go to the doctor or seek some form of therapy or help. And that's perfectly normal in a dream when we're in body, appear to be in bodies.
Yep.
So I wanted to point that out to make that distinction that, if there's one thing that's going to happen is we're all going to appear to pass from this world, and we don't have to fight that idea.
Nothing wrong with the magic, right?
But there's nothing wrong with the magic either.
I was thinking about that wonderful, so much in all of your books, Gary, but in the fourth book, the lifetime when Buddha had a son that was Jesus. I don't recall the names, but anyway, they didn't take very good care of their bodies, and so they just kind of had a short lifetime, and out there, that was it, kind of thing. Because that didn't concern them. There's nothing wrong with taking your body, care of your body, so they last a little longer, but just not to make that the big deal, the big end all.
When Cindy was talking about that, I was thinking, this is a very funny movie by Seth MacFarlane called A Million Ways to Die in the West. God. It is a riot. It is so funny because it shows how ludicrous this world is with all the different things that can happen to you. And if we take the body seriously, it's something to worry about. But he just points out how bizarre and how ridiculous it is. That there's just so many different ways to die and for things to go wrong. And it's all a setup, of course, but we don't know that. And so that's very funny. It kind of lightens up the subject.
I recommend that movie.
Yeah, that's really fun.
Very funny movie. And Bruce, a poem came across my attention recently where I just happened to, no accident, fall upon this website where you were talking about Charles C. Finn and his poem.
Oh, yes.
Right? Listen,
don't be fooled.
Don't
be fooled by saying. Don't be fooled by me. Listen to what I'm not saying. Yeah.
That's a great poem.
Isn't that a wonderful poem?
Yes, I wanted to bring it up for whoever's listening to.
Yeah.
I recommend reading that poem by Charles C. Finn. Isn't it? What is it?
I think that's something like that. Yeah. It's been a while since but yeah.
What I'm not saying, or
I'll put a link in the blog post. Yeah.
I think it's a fabulous poem.
Yeah.
I think that man, and he's probably in his early 80s by now. He wrote that in 1966 before the course was published, and he had the right idea there of how he was expressing, the ego and fear, and how we all can feel at times if we're thinking with the ego. I just recommend it for people. It's very profound. I read it in our online class.
Oh, great. Yeah.
But I happened to see it was part of your blog, and I didn't even know that
well, I had just Googled it and found it, and because it was something that I was in a program called Creative Dynamics back in the early 70s, and that came up in that program, and it was part of the curriculum that I was studying, and I just thought it was really thoughtful, and points out that the facade of everyone is fighting a hard battle. And then what you were saying earlier is like the beginning, right before the rules for decision in chapter 30. It's don't fight yourself, and we're all fighting ourselves, and that's why it's an exhausting, enervating process. But we need to exonerate ourselves. That word came up in an NPR interview I listened to the other day. For an impossible crime that no one could commit, including ourselves. Right? And that's the quantum forgiveness, isn't it? Seeing that nothing could possibly happen in truth to diminish or disturb our perfect innocence in any way. So we don't need to have a face of innocence where it's a partial thing. We just need to recognize that everyone's innocent in order for the we-they paradigm to dissolve, right?
Yeah, it's so important to go over that and true forgiveness. And
absolutely.
That really means we're really healing ourselves, letting go of being a prisoner of our own minds, and we forgive that way and see everybody as the same. We're all equal part of God. It doesn't matter who it is, and that it's impossible that anybody or anything outside of us could do something to us unless we give them permission. And so we're doing this to ourselves, and that's who wants to hear that? We're doing this we're doing this to ourselves, no matter how vicious. And we can even think of, and I want to say this in the most compassionate way, and I mean this in the most compassionate way, but let's use an example like the war right now. The Israeli.
Which one?
I know, which one?
What day of the week is it?
Many thousands upon thousands. War is war, period. No matter whose side is fighting who, war is war. And if we can compassionately look at this now particular war, it's not different than any other war in content. Because the battle ultimately can be traced back to the ego thinking it has to battle God. It has to battle, got to fight for its survival. Each side has to fight for its survival. And until we have, which I totally agree with, Art and Persis say in the Course says, but until we have inner peace, we work on our own inner peace, we're always going to perceive a world of battle. But it starts with ourselves. We can't expect other people we can't fix their dreams, even they're not really there, but we tend to want to fix the dream and change the dream. We need to change our own minds about our own inner battle. And when we do that, we can then be an example that, of a healed healer, that is starting to and sees with correct perception. That all battles are first won and lost in the mind. It starts in the mind.
What you just said, Cindy, kind of reminded me of that tendency to want to fix other people's stuff. I think I find that if I'm doing that, I'm forgetting that I've got my dream repair technician hat on, and actually now I've got another adjective, recovering dream repair technician, and
one of my favorite. One of my favorite quotes from the Course lately, because every few months I'm the kind of guy I'll see a quote and it'll stick with me for a while until I really get it. And one of the ones I've been thinking about lately is it says the alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that kind of stops you in your tracks right there, if you remember that.
Exactly. That's such a great one. Yeah. It's sort of like the idea that another thing I find helpful when I remember it is that, and this is really practical, is if I can remember that I'm the only one that needs to wake up everyone else has already been, partying in heaven, waiting for me patiently to get with the program. And if I cannot concern myself with anyone else's, forgiveness trajectory, path, curriculum, whatever, I'll be doing just fine, just minding my own, forgiveness classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, that's there is some humor to this, there really is that.
Yeah,
Like as you said, like I realize that I'm the one that everybody's home. We're all home in God, dreaming, right? So we're all home in God. So if I'm annoyed or upset, I forget that I'm with everyone else, that as one, we're home in God. Who needs the healing? It's like,
well, the only one left is me. I guess I better.
That's the only one. And we keep, of course, as we keep thinking that there are really people out there on the screen doing things to us. That, in other words, we're at the effect of them. Yeah. But this world is an effect. It's not the cause of anything.
Bruce, you remember you mentioned zingers, zingers in the course and the humor. And I get a kick out of them. I really do. Like, she's, this will tell you what Jesus thinks of our careers, our so-called careers. He's talking in The Hero of the Dream. He's talking about, these things that we want to get. And then he says about most people, they work to get them doing senseless things. And that's about what he thinks about our grand careers.
The paper strips and metal discs and all that. I synchronistically, I'm turned to it right here. How's that for minds are joined? Yeah.
And it's the whole thing is senseless.
Yeah.
But we're trying to make sense of the senseless.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
I remember. I won't say any names here, just to keep people's privacy. But
come on.
But and so I'll keep it private. But I remember that we came across once a young person, pretty young, and this young person, we have a lot of young people, by the way, that come to our workshops, and they are very advanced. I'm talking, they could be 12 or 13 years old, even younger. Sometimes I've seen before, even younger than that, very advanced, beings here. But anyway, I remember this young person's mother was talking about, how she was trying to solve an issue, a problem she was having. And her daughter was with her. And her daughter, I think she understood a lot of A Course in Miracles, at a very young age. And so she was listening to her mother talk about all these ways of trying to solve her problem. And she said to her mother, "Mommy, is this your plan for salvation?" Is this your plan for? I'm thinking, here's this young, that is something that most adults wouldn't even say to someone, is this your plan for salvation? Which told me she understood what salvation really meant. Because she was is this your plan? And so the mother was stopped in her tracks and had to just laugh and go, "Oh my gosh." And so let's not underestimate the power of our young people and what we can learn from them,
and everyone can be a mirror, right?
Anybody.
As you're sharing that, I was thinking about a couple of decades ago, at least now. And my wife, when I had first gotten together and got married, she looked at the Course a little bit for a while, and I started getting into this political thing, a sovereignty-based kind of thing. And I was going down this road that was not making me happy, but I felt, by golly, this is what I needed to be doing. And at one point, when I got just far enough that I was about to jump into metaphoric quicksand, she kind of stopped me, thwack between the eyebrows and said, "Bruce, would you rather be right or happy?" And it was like, okay, where have I heard that before? And it was it was a perfect thing that she said to me. And it was like, okay, thank you for that course correction. Yeah, I just needed just yeah, pun intended in the course correction.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did that was
But-
just what I needed to hear. So yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful example.
That's great.
I love it.
Yeah.
that's great. By the way, what Cindy was saying about young people, I've seen a big change the last 20 years or so in the dynamics of the crowds that come to the workshops. I remember my first workshop 20 years ago. I would say it was 90% women and mostly older women. Today, it's not unusual to have 40% men instead of 10%. And instead of all older people, it's all ages now, including people, a lot of people in the 20s, but even younger
Yeah.
sometimes. I like to think that the disappearance of the universe had something to do with that.
Yeah.
And
would
it's
think
like, it's really changed, and in a good way.
Mhm.
And when we go to Asia, it's even younger. It's like everybody seems to be in their 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
But I
that's
think
true.
I think they like the course because it's first of all it's radical. Secondly, they're tired of their parents' world and their politics and their beliefs. They can see that it's not working for them anyway. It may work for their parents, but they can see it's not working for them. We go to countries like I was shocked when we went to South Korea. They just work themselves to death. You know, it's like that's all they do, and they make their children go to school. It's like they don't have a childhood. It's like nothing but work, and so there's a bit of a rebellion going on, I think, and it's interesting to see them take to A Course in Miracles because we go there and we have them in our workshops, and it's really an interesting phenomenon to see.
That's neat. That's neat. Have you by any chance seen was it Extraordinary Attorney Wu? It's a series on I think it's on Amazon or Netflix. And it's this attorney who basically what's the term? Anyway, but if you haven't seen it, you might enjoy it. It basically exemplifies the idea that there's a wisdom in places you wouldn't expect it, kind of thing. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Can you say the title again?
The Extraordinary Attorney Wu.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I'll send you the link, so I'll put it in.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
I'll find it.
But it's fun, and she also has a thing about whales. And whenever she gets inspired, these whales go floating by in the background. it's just a lot of fun. Anyway, it's kind of a hoot. But,
Good.
It's right up my alley.
Yeah.
I'll fly around in the background. But I want to go back from it to the South about the play, about how hardworking they are.
Yes. Yeah.
This reminds me of, do you remember I'm sure you do, but in The Sound of Music, the movie, of course, the musical, one of my favorite musical movies of all time. The important message Maria was trying to get across to Captain Von Trapp about how the children need time for play. How they had to march the grounds really strictly, breathing deeply, and march the grounds. And she kept going, "Excuse me, sir, when is their playtime? When is their time to play?" She kept having to, and he would have none of it until she got through to him. That it just reminds me of the course of the seriousness that we can take the world and ourselves so seriously. We need to playtime as part of that laughter, right? To remember that we all need that playtime to play.
Absolutely.
Like a little kid, not forget that sense of wonderment that keeps us, that innocence, that's like a part of a quality of innocence is to be playful, is to laugh, which is to be playful. Remember to laugh. And so
it's sort of like that Zen beginner's mind, isn't it? Where when you're in that frame of mind, when you just stop long enough to notice things, there is that playfulness. And I was thinking that kind of ties into what you were just talking about a little earlier about, instead of waking up and dreading, there's all these horrible things. What if it's like, well, I get to look at my mind and discover new ways to forgive each day, things that I wouldn't have, that would have been, horrific things before, but now I can learn to not just blow them out of the water, but just watch them kind of dissolve by themselves with Holy Spirit's help. Not all at once, but just, a little bit more each day.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes just the simple things can help you and make a big difference. It's like Einstein. One of his favorite things to do was just to go have an ice cream cone. It's like one of his favorite things. And if he had a tough, mathematical equation to figure out or to express something, and he couldn't do it, and he started to get upset, he'd go have an ice cream cone. And by the way, once I remember he was having a hard time. I read about this, and he tripped and his ice cream cone fell onto the ground, and he actually burst into tears. Now, because he was having such a hard time, and I was thinking, if you didn't know who he was, right, and you saw this old man weeping because he dropped his ice cream cone, probably wouldn't have been too impressed.
Yeah.
With him, so it just goes to show anybody can have a bad day.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so innocent, though.
Yeah.
Like that he enjoyed ice cream so much that, I mean, there's an innocence behind that, though, a rawness that he could just, I don't know, show that emotion, or not. But just because he was Einstein doesn't mean that he's, this perfect being either. And he can get upset too, we are like little children. We're all like these little children. We want our ice cream. The ego wants its cake. The ego wants its ice cream. But we're all like that. We all have that part of the mind. But there's an innocence to the idea of remembering we are children of God. We're part of God. We still have a child in us that's learning and growing, right? As we undo the ego, until we grow into mature spiritual adults, we're children, and I think it's good. It's a healthy perspective to kind of keep that in mind, so we don't keep thinking we're further along than we might be. And look, maybe we are further along, and sometimes we feel like the Course says, we're not, but we really are. And then vice versa. We might be not as far as we think, yet we really have made progress.
We don't know how to measure, do we? No.
We just can't judge it.
Our advances on our retreats, we get mixed up, it says, right?
We get mixed up.
It's like the Course says, children don't assume that they know everything. They'll ask questions, but which is what we need to do. That's what it means to become like little children, where you're willing to have the Holy Spirit explain things to you instead of assuming that you're the one who knows everything, because you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We assume so much, don't we, that we think we have it figured out. And that I was just flipping through. I had the page turned to something that I must have left it, but it was basically the quote about how we assume that our understanding is a powerful contribution to the truth and makes it what it is. It's like,
right.
Wait a minute, and then nowhere in the Course does, as Ken Wapnick points out, does Jesus ever refer to us as adults? It's like, I mean, it's like, okay, so, but that's actually a good thing. That's how I look at it. Is if that means if we're really just babes, then that means we really can't afford to just look with fresh eyes on everything and see the potential for forgiveness that maybe we overlooked so many times in so many ways. Yeah.
True. And to go back to your what you said earlier about, we could choose to wake up every day and use that part of the Course that says, how many opportunities we have to gladden ourselves, how many that we do actually end up resisting, but we have so many opportunities to gladden ourselves. I like that, because it reminds, what if we woke up every day with that thought, instead of, I remember Ken once said, instead of waking up and saying, damn it, here I go again, damn it, here I go again, but instead replace that with, wow, okay, let's see what today, right? I mean, you can still decide the kind of day you want to have, as the Course says, and rules for decision. But what if something does go, we choose wrongly throughout the day? Well, okay, one option, remember our other choices, we can choose to use it as an opportunity to make happy, to gladden ourselves, to forgive, which is to forgive and remember the truth.
To show you how much I've changed. When I was in my 20s, because I got on a spiritual path maybe when I was around 27. Before that, in my 20s, the alarm clock would go off in the morning and I would go, shit,
Groundhog Day, right?
You know,
That's
that's how
Yeah.
enthusiastic I was about life. You know, I hated life, I hated people, I hated
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know how God could allow all these terrible things to happen to good people. And one of the real revelations of my life was to realize that he didn't have anything to do with it, and that he was still perfect love.
Yeah.
Yeah, and boy, that changed everything.
Yeah.
But man, I used to, you know, just hey, today the alarm clock goes off, and it's like first thing always thought that comes into my mind was Jesus, you're in charge. So right from the very first second of every day, in my mind, Jesus is in charge of my day. And of course, what we do is a result of what we think. So if he's in charge of my thoughts, you know, I'm probably going to be okay.
I laugh at myself when I say that, and then I forget during the day, and I'm like completely like the ego's in charge. And then I just laugh. I just have to remember to laugh, and then I go, oh yeah, my every day I do wake up saying that. And then as probably as most of us do, I won't say, I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths, but sometimes things might show up and then you forget that goal. You forget that Jesus is in charge. Or you forget that. It's easy to forget that sometimes. So, but we can be patient and gentle with ourselves and just come back to
Yes.
it when we
Yes.
key is patience and gentleness and compassion, and not judge, just go, oh, so I forgot. Okay, I can choose again. Choose again, choose again.
Yeah, by the way, I just wanted to mention that
Yeah.
I think I can honestly say today that I love God.
Mhm.
So sometimes we forget how far the journey has been. You know, to go from hating God to loving God, that's something. That's
Yeah.
quite a shift.
Yeah.
You know, and I like the quote, this isn't from the course, but it's more the self-help type movement, but there's a past version of you that is so proud of how far you've come. Yeah, because you know, if you could look back, if you could go back to the past and be that person and see how far you've come, you might be surprised. You might be very pleasantly surprised. So we should always be beating ourselves up because we're not perfect.
Yeah.
And
Yep, for sure.
after
So true.
that, one could say there's a future aspect saying, encouraging, saying, look how far you are, right? Encouraging us to say, hey, look what you have become, you know? And there's that version of us, because in the illusion, there's a self fully enlightened version of ourselves within the illusion as well. So it's like you have that future and past self, but they can both act as, right, as what, you know, just to tie into what you were saying about the past self, there would also be the other aspect, the future, also going, hey, what's there to worry about? Because look what's happening. You're already at home in God, you know, my wise self, the higher, right, Holy Spirit part of yourself is saying, you're already there.
Our inner Artons and Perses are already
Our
seeing that
inner-
the dream of exile is over, right? So,
Right, the dream of exile is over. So there's that voice too. So
Yeah.
that's I loved that, because there's also that future aspect that we can, even though still time is in the realm of illusion, it doesn't mean it can't be useful sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
when Disappearance came out, I would hear from these really mystical people like Richard Smalley. He was the editor of Gnosis magazine at the time in New York, and he said, "Yeah, I really like that idea where you could get help from your future self to become yourself."
Mhm.
And there are some really mystical people who were taken with that idea. I mean, I wasn't even thinking much about those things when the book happened. In fact, I learned a lot about things that I knew nothing about. I didn't know about much at all about ascended masters or anything like that. I didn't know Saint Germain had been appearing at Mount Shasta for, you know, the last 80 years or whatever. I didn't know much about a lot of things that are in the book. And by the way, that's just another reminder to me that I never would have understood A Course in Miracles without the way it was explained to me. In the book.
And your books, and both of your books, Gary and Cindy, have been such, you know, openers, you know, can openers, eye openers. Certainly for me in 2007, when in Ashland, Oregon, when I found the book on Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library, it's like, I've got to go back and reread the course. How did I miss all this?
Yeah.
that God doesn't have anything to do with duality. It's all about forgiveness. How did I read all three of those books and miss those key ideas?
Hey, I hear you, man. I
Yeah.
meet people today who are doing the course. Like
Yeah.
you go to a study group or something.
Mm-hmm.
They've been studying the course for 5 or 10 years who don't know that it's about forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But once you understand that, you see it everywhere in the course. It's all through the
Yep.
course. It says
Yep.
forgiveness is the central theme that runs throughout salvation. You're holding all of its parts in meaningful relationships. The course it runs directed and its outcome sure. It's like forgiveness is the glue that holds the whole thing together. And it's actually possible to study the course for years and to not see that because, well, first of all, your ego doesn't want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's good to have things dawn on you because it opens up a whole new way of looking at the course. You keep getting it on deeper and deeper levels. And it's like my jokes. You keep getting them on deeper and deeper levels. And it's fun. It's not just work. It can be a lot of fun.
I think my favorite joke of yours is about the talking dog, and the and he don't believe any of that. He's such a liar. That I love that one.
That is a good one.
Because but that's the one I immediately realized. Oh yeah, we're all such pathological liars here. We're all telling each other and ourselves that we're something that we're not. It's like
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, whenever you call somebody a fraud or a fake, well, we all are.
Yeah, we're all in costume 24/7.
Literally we thought we stole part of the mind from God.
Mm-hmm.
So my teacher said to me, Gary, you took it. You got to give it back.
Long-term loan, but it's overdue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since I do want to plug something because
please do.
Since relationships are, gosh, the meat of how we practice forgiveness for most of us, at least. I mean, we're in a relationship with something all the time.
And a vital part of the course.
Right. Vital part of the course, special relationships, it talks about that and how we can transform them into holy relationships. For those that don't know, I did release a new book back in June called, I'm going to show it here, because I believe it could be truly helpful for people in relationship with whoever you're in relationship with, but it's called Spiritual Coupling, a guidebook for experiencing a holy relationship, and it can be found on Amazon.
That's me on the left.
Yeah, that's scary. Yeah. Well, see, it shows two equal beings there, but holding a heart. Because love is what holds us together, not fear. Mm-hmm. Love is what holds us together. And that's when we remember that, we can transform our relationships into holy ones. We remember it's the love that's real. And anyway, my book talks about all aspects of relationships, but it does make a distinction between the special relationship and holy one as well. So it can be found on Amazon with other books if anybody finds that topic of interest.
Thank you. Yeah, and all of your books are wonderful and all highly recommended. So
yeah, in fact, originally we were going to write that book together.
I know.
And then Arden first kind of like intervened and said, well, no, wait a minute, Gary, we want you to do the fifth book with us. And Cindy is supposed to write the one about relationships. She's the one with the psychological background, and she's done hundreds of counseling sessions for people. And she was the one to write that book. And Arden person wanted me to get busy on this one. I think a lot of it is to address just all the madness that's been going on, just to remind people what it's for and how to do it.
Yeah, it's all perfectly orchestrated.
Yep. It is.
Yeah. And well, it's been amazing to have this discussion.
Oh, and there's so many things we could go on with, but thank you. Yeah.
I know it could go on and on. I mean, there's so much to talk about. But
I just wanted to thank you for all that you do for the course.
Oh, well, likewise, so much.
And I know you had a lot to do with the online version of the Course in Miracles. And actually,
I was more of a cheerleader in what Felix and the rest of the FIP team did on that. but because when that started, I kind of finished what I was doing with the reworking of the FIP website, but I use the web edition of the course all the time, and just it's so helpful. Yes.
It sure is. I remember
yeah.
the old days when I was writing my first book. There was nothing. There was not even a concordance yet of the course, and they said, I said, "Well, you're going to tell me where all these quotes are, right?" And they said, "No, we want you to find them." And that was their way of tricking a lazy guy into studying even more, which I did. But today, that online version is so helpful.
Isn't it though? Isn't
Sure
it though?
is.
So is
Yeah.
the website. So thank you.
Thank you for being a part of that, Bruce. And
Oh,
and
well, like I say,
yeah.
cheerleading, yes, for sure. But kudos particularly to Felix Alcala and all the folks at FIP that
Yeah.
Sure.
supported
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Shout
And
out to
continue.
them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 I'm
Yeah,
glad
well-
that the foundation called themselves the Foundation for Inner Peace, because it's like we've said before, the people of the world will never live in peace until the people of the world have inner peace. So maybe it's even more important than we realized at the time.
We have to reverse the reversal of cause and effect, put the cause back in the mind, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So important.
Perfect.
And both of you have made such an enormous contributions to so many people in that regard. So
I
thank
only
you.
know that
We
because,
enjoy it.
yeah, thanks. I only know that because people tell me, because I don't feel like I've done anything, so I don't even feel like I'm the author of the books. Like maybe 1/3 of it. So, but at the same time, it makes me feel good. People think I've done something.
The only way we really get sometimes that what we're doing is helpful is the feedback when we're doing our, whether it's, people emailing us or our in-person events, and we're doing the book signings, or that's when we really get the feedback and we go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That I'm so happy that person really, felt helped by that, or that's when we really get the impact, that the teachings have on people. It doesn't have to be through us, it could be through anybody, but that's how we're really grateful for that feedback, because it tells us, wow, this is really meaningful for people, and it's been really helpful. And it's a pleasure, truly a pleasure to be a part of this path.
Well, it's and
it benefits us too. It benefits
Sure,
anyone
sure.
who's teaching it, because you're learning it as well. So we just appreciate it and being a part of the path.
Yeah, and I know that without Course of Miracles, my life would have been pretty sad. So, boy,
gosh,
what a difference.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back 16 years ago when DU crossed my path, and I'm thinking, what would have happened had I not found that? I think my life would have been pretty different.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was familiar with the course, but it was kind of became a back burner. Every once in a while I pick it up, kind of thing. Not anymore, as Inspector Clouseau would say. No, it's pretty much a constant companion. So yeah. Whether digital or treeware. Yeah. Yep. So
yeah, well, gosh, I mean, Bruce, I love our conversations.
Oh, likewise.
Yeah, I know we'll do this again.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely do this again. And it's really enjoyable.
Thank you for the time, and look forward to sharing the next one.
Yeah. Us too. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. You're a real friend, and we appreciate it.
And a wonderful contributor to the course community as well.
Oh, thanks to both.